Hi, I'm Therek from Pantheon Plus, and I don't know what that wizard told you, but as you know, wizards can't be trusted. They've always got tons of tricks up their sleeves. So I'm going to tell you about what I just heard from Joppa and Minus on the new Parting the Veil podcast by Visionary Realms. And this was a pretty interesting discussion, and I think it was good for VR to try and dispel the notion that Pantheon is being designed as a niche game. You definitely see that a lot in the comments and discussions that go on around this game. And I wanted to sort of ask myself, I wanted to know why do people believe that, and why did VR feel the need to make a podcast like this? Why do they need to get around that idea? And of course, Pantheon does have some historical baggage with it that leads people to think it's going to be a niche game. But we're going to put that aside for a second and talk about what they discussed in the podcast. Because when you break it down, it's pretty obvious. So to me, Pantheon gets called a niche game because it's doing something that other modern MMOs aren't. And when you say that, you think, oh, well, that means they're doing something that MMOs used to do. That's sort of the default to saying something is not meeting a commonly accepted parameters for a game. But that's also not true. And I think that's one of the key takeaways here is that it's neither. They see an alternate path forward that evolves into something new, and old design principles into something that, the way Joppa describes it, is being universally compelling. Here's what he actually said, and I really liked this line.
What I think about most in the process of designing Pantheon or discussing design decisions with other designers on the team and just overall shepherding the design of this game, it is truly about what kind of game, what kind of experience would be the most compelling game experience. What is going to be the most exciting and fulfilling and satisfying? And that's why when I think of Pantheon being thought of as a niche game, it's difficult for me because I believe a lot of what we're tapping into is so much more of a shared desire among fans of this genre. And that is to step into a truly immersive and overwhelmingly large and deep world as a character that has incredible amounts of places to grow and ways to grow and progress and depths of the world and the setting and the cultures that are there for the taking.
And I can get behind that. So the question becomes, how far can you deviate from common current design tenets while still maintaining this goal? And I think the conclusion he comes to is that designing for players to have an immersive experience as much as possible will, by necessity, keep Pantheon from being a niche game. After all, isn't that what everyone wants? But the details determine how far that will go at the end of the day. And using the death penalty, which they talked about, I think is a good way of illustrating that. There was another moment that I thought was key to understanding what exactly they were talking about here, and Joppa mentioned alienating players and how their goal, of course, is not to alienate players. But of course, the question then is how far will you go to prevent alienating players? And I think in the community, this is what gets to the core of this. I think there's this deep-seated fear that line of thinking has led us to where we are today in terms of modern MMO design when it comes to challenge, when it comes to consequences in MMOs. And the death penalty is the ultimate consequence. Personally, I think there comes a point where devs have to risk some player alienation in their choices. And Joppa acknowledged that. He said that they're trying to find that balance. And I'm big about balance in every aspect, in a lot of things. So to hear him say that is reassuring. Now, again, it's about details. What will the details will achieve that balance? And I think that's what people want to know. Pantheon's going to be judged based on the experience it provides at the end of the day. To label it a niche game in the context of this discussion is seen as a negative. But to me, it doesn't necessarily mean that. And I know Joppa defined what niche means to them at the very beginning of the podcast, talking about how it speaks to a game or speaks to something that's being designed for a certain subset or only palatable to a certain subset of people. And I don't hear that when I hear niche. I think in this context denotes identity. And I think that it conjures up a sense of standing out in the crowd. So not being designed for a small subset of people, and we know that they've said Pantheon's not being designed that way, either intentionally or unintentionally. But it's gonna help define what Pantheon is by being different. And when you're different, does that make you niche? So it comes down to semantics in some sense. But at the end of the day, my reaction to what they're talking about here is that Pantheon won't be a niche game, but it's not because it's not being designed for a small subset of people, but because it's going to redefine the standards of what current game design is all about. That might be a lofty goal. That might be a very high-minded goal, but the company's called Visionary Realms. And without vision, there's nothing to build upon. And the last part of the podcast where they talked about this is where I think it really rings true, is that you may be standing on the shoulders of giants that have come before in terms of your design mentality. EverQuest, Vanguard, those kinds of things. However, it doesn't mean that they're bound by that. And I like what Minus said. The question was asked, does being a niche game limit creativity? And of course it does. So they don't want to be limited by that. They don't want to be bound by the constraints of their forebears, so to speak. So I think that you heard that, and I think that came across. So that's my thoughts on this. Again, if you see a wizard around who's telling you otherwise, be suspicious.
Hello, I'm Draq Attack. I'm not sure we can trust anything that ranger says. I mean, he hugs trees and bunnies. Can we really trust someone that hugs trees and bunnies? I don't think we can. Anyway, I'm here to talk about the recent VR drop, the big news. And the biggest news for me is it's a podcast. I love podcasts. They're calling it Parting the Veil. And the first episode was with Minus and Joppa, and for me, those are my favorite two VR devs. I know Minus is new, but we worked with him here at Pantheon Plus, and he will always have a soft place in my heart. And the podcast format is perfect for him. It's like breathing air from him. He does so well with it. And of course, Joppa, he's the man. He runs the whole show, so you know when he's on that you're gonna get like what's going to happen and what's going on. And so for me, the podcast format is excellent. I love those two guys. This week they covered niche, and is Pantheon a niche game? And so I want to start this off by playing a little clip, and then we're going to talk about it.
One of the places we could go to specifically is in talking about the death penalty. A death penalty is something that people will, often associate with a niche type game.
So Joppa talks about the death penalty being niche in MMORPGs, and I think that's true. I think that it has become a little bit of a niche mechanic, but I don't think that is the essence of how it should be. I think that's a mistake by the MMORPG genre, right? I think that MMOs have gone that route, but that's a problem, because an MMO provides you something that other games do not, and that is consistency in the world. And so when you have consistency in the world, I want to be my character. I want to be involved in my character. I want to be emotionally attached to my character. Not like over the top, like weepy, but when I die, it should hurt a little bit. Like I should be like, oh, like that sucks. And so I don't, if there's no death penalty, if there's no, like I can just keep graveyard rushing something and that's a strategy because I don't care how many times I die, then that for me removes some of the, I think Joppa said, elasticity or plasticity of the game. And so for me, I love the death mechanic, and I want them to put it in. I want it to be, as Joppa said, a way to build tension and a way to experience danger in an MMO. I can't tell you how many times that in EQ where I felt it was dangerous. When we went to Mistmore that very first time, and we're going through in EverQuest, and we're going through, and we died in the graveyard, and I was like, oh, we're never gonna get back there. I'm never gonna get my body back. And it was just like, and it was just so tension filled. And when we finally got back and we finally got my body back, I was so excited because I was like, yes, we did it. We got the stuff back. And so that was super exciting. And I don't want to lose that feeling in MMORPGs that I play. I think it's super important. And so for me, I know why current day MMOs have gone away with it, because they're catering to the quote unquote casual player, right? And I just think that's a super mistake, because even if you're casual, you still want to connect with your player. And I don't think that should be pushed to the side. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't cater to the casual people in some ways, because I've been a part of MMOs that only specifically catered to the hardcore. That's called WildStar. I love that game, but it died specifically because, in my opinion, because it catered to the hardcore and not its casual base. And that game died because there was nobody playing it. It was only the hardcore guilds. And then when only the hardcore guilds were left, they all left to go play with the casuals in a different MMO. And so it was horrible. So I don't repeat that failure. But with the death penalty specific, I don't think it needs to be niche. I think that they've got this spot on, and I love that they talk about this. All right, so let's get to the second clip I have. And this is Minus talking about how we can't develop a game of the past.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because I immediately, when I hear that niche game comment, I wonder how you could design in a way that you're looking at such a small subset or a period of time. And I say, isn't that limiting creativity? If you're going to say that we're going to try to make this game for this time period with these things, I feel like you leave a lot on the table. Do you agree with that? I mean, do you think about that when you're designing? We don't want to be limited by something that was kind of set up so long ago.
Now, when I hear this comment by Minus, what I'm thinking is that my mind always goes to EQ, right? And so what I'm thinking is Pantheon is not EQ niche, right? We are not, the Pantheon devs are not developing Pantheon to be EQ with updated graphics. And I know that Brad MacLeod was the vision behind this, and I know that it draws from the EQ spirit. It absolutely does. The way that they've set this up, and the pillars and the rock hard foundation draws from EQ. And I know that I love EQ. I still play it 20 years later. I was there on launch day. I played it. And I love EQ. But Pantheon is not EQ3. It's just not. Hopefully one day Daybreak will get their act, or Darkpaw, or whatever they are now, will get their act together, and they'll launch EQ3, and I'll spend all my money on that. I will, and I'll be there for it, and I'll play it. I don't even care if it's a scam. I'll do it. But that's not what this is. That's not Pantheon. We don't want Pantheon to be restrained by the past. It's not EQ. It can't be restrained by EQ. We can't expect them to make this game like EQ. They have completely different visions, and they're breaking forward with new ideas like climbing and the perception system and all this other stuff that is groundbreaking MMO stuff. And they're going to take things from WoW, and they're going to take things from other MMOs that were successful, and they're going to push forward with their own game. And I am 100% here for it, because I trust in the devs. I trust that they're going to put out a game that I want. And I'm at least going to give them a chance to see what it's like before I come down with the condemnation. And so I love that they're not developing a quote unquote niche game. They're not only sectioned for a certain part of the market, or they're not only developing for old EQ people. They're developing a game for the market, for the gaming market, and they want all EverQuest players, or even all RPG players, to give this a tryout and to see if they like it. Well, I hope you've enjoyed Therek and Draq React. We hope to be doing these videos after more Pantheon drops, and so please like and subscribe and share to all your friends. Onward and upward. Have a great day. Draq Attack out.
Until next time. Cheers, and thanks for watching.